But then on top of that, Caitlin Clark is eligible to be that max contract player because of this new rule in 2027. So that is the player, if you're the Indiana Fever, if you're any franchise for that matter, I would assume that Caitlin Clark would get that priority to become your max contract player, your franchise player. She is currently already the face of the league. The Indiana Fever would have to clear that space for hers.
The WNBA has just unveiled a new CBA proposal that has longtime veterans openly frustrated, while many younger stars appear quietly pleased. The message from the league seems clear. The future faces of the franchise will reach bigger paychecks much faster. Meanwhile, the players who spent years building the league are left watching from the sidelines. The real drama has not even begun yet, but the situation is already fascinating. Who stands to gain the most from this proposed deal? The rising young stars, the experienced veterans, or the league itself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let's break down what the WNBA has done, because it may be one of the smartest strategic decisions the league has made in quite some time, a statement that is not often said. The league recently presented a fresh CBA proposal to the Players' Union, and hidden within the details is a clause that could completely reshape how player earnings are discussed, particularly for talents like Caitlin Clark and Paige Bueckers. According to the Associated Press, which first reported the story, the specifics are every bit as surprising and dramatic as the headline implies.
Revenue sharing model, and they are also not budging on the salary cap. So the one that they just submitted said the salary cap will still be at $5.75 million. Now, as we have seen before, both sides have conceded on things that to me just feel like minor details, like they've gone back and forth about the housing, and now the WNBA said that they will provide housing. And they've also talked about, like exclusivity was something that was immediately taken off the table months ago. So all of these little extra things both sides have been conceding on, but when it comes down to the revenue sharing and the salary cap, both sides are still very far apart from one another. But there is one thing in the most recent proposal from the WNBA that stood out to me, and that was this. It said players on rookie contracts who are first or second team all league.
Here is what the proposal actually states. Players still on rookie contracts who are selected to the first or second team all league would become eligible to sign a maximum contract in their fourth season. In addition, once they sign that extension, they would no longer be subject to a franchise tag. To put real names to that rule, Caitlin Clark could qualify for a max contract in 2027, Paige Bueckers in 2028, and Aaliyah Boston as early as the 2026 season. Take a moment and read that carefully, because the league has essentially outlined a very clear financial pathway for its most marketable young talents, and it appears to be a deliberate move. But before diving into the inevitable player drama, which will almost certainly happen, it is important to examine the broader salary figures, since much of the coverage surrounding this topic has been somewhat superficial. Under the proposed deal, the salary cap in the first year would rise to $5.75 million, compared to the current $1.5 million. In percentage terms, that represents a massive 280% jump in the salary cap. Despite that dramatic increase, the narrative dominating discussions around this CBA for months has been that the league is being tight-fisted and the players are being treated unfairly, a storyline that exists alongside a 280% cap increase, which is quite a remarkable contrast.
Only one player currently, with how the salary structure is, could get that max contract. So this is where it really starts getting sticky with some of these teams. If players' goal is to be that max contract salary player, because as of right now, there's only room for one of those players on every single team. Only one. So with the Indiana Fever, who do they offer that max salary to? Do they offer it to Kelsey Mitchell, someone who's been a veteran in this league, but maybe has less years to go before she retires? Or do you sign somebody like Aaliyah Boston and try to keep her, and she's a younger player and she has the potential to be with that franchise for many years to come? But then on top of that, Caitlin Clark is eligible to be that max contract player because of this new rule in 2027. So that is the player, if you're the Indiana Fever, if you're any franchise for that matter, I would assume that Caitlin Clark would get that priority to become your max contract player.
Even so, $5.75 million still falls short of what the Players' Union has been advocating for. Their target has been closer to a $9 million salary cap. The league's proposal keeps the cap at $5.75 million in the first year and gradually increases it to $8.5 million by the sixth year. So yes, there is a legitimate gap between the two sides. However, the leap from $1.5 million to $5.75 million is also significant, yet it has largely been mentioned as if it were just a minor detail. Maximum salaries are also rising dramatically in a way that is difficult to overlook. The top salary would jump from $249,000 to about $1.3 million. Meanwhile, the average player's salary would climb from roughly $120,000 to $540,000 in just the first year of the agreement. These are far from small adjustments. They represent the type of financial shift that can redefine what it means to build a long-term career in professional women's basketball. On top of those changes, the league reached another milestone. For the first time in WNBA history, players received a revenue-sharing payout from the 2025 season. A total of $8 million was distributed among the league's players. Individually, that meant bonuses ranging from around $33,000 to $50,000 on top of their regular salaries. Here is where things become particularly interesting. That $8 million payout came during a season in which Caitlin Clark missed most of the games due to injury. She was never officially ruled out for the entire season, remained with the team, and attended every game from the sidelines. Yet, even under those circumstances, the league still produced enough revenue to cross the required threshold for revenue sharing for the very first time.
With this current offer. Now, that's not to say that some of these players might not even care about their max contract or staying with a team only because of that. And there is probably players who would take a bit of a pay cut if they knew they could stay with a team that has a core that they really like to play with, or they know they can win a championship with this team in the next few seasons. But that was something that I thought was so very interesting, and is also the reason why I'm a bit concerned that free agency is going to be so short, because the reality of it is even if the CBA got signed today, they're already so late. At this point in time in the year, the expansion teams would have already literally had their rosters by now. Most all teams would have had their rosters set in stone by now. We are already well past that date. And as we know,
so now the players are likely looking at the numbers closely, or at least they should be, and running some very simple calculations. If the revenue-sharing program produced $8 million during a season when the league's biggest attraction spent most of the time sidelined, then what might that number look like in 2026 if she plays an entire season? And what could it become by 2027? The outlook becomes even more intriguing once Paige Bueckers enters the WNBA, and two of the most talked about young stars in women's basketball are both competing throughout a full year. It is reasonable to assume that projections for revenue sharing have shifted significantly since that $8 million payout was announced. That shift in expectations has probably influenced how certain players are evaluating the current proposal. A revenue-sharing model that is guaranteed and grows annually feels very different from one that exists only in theory. Now the players have actually experienced it. They have received the checks. That context becomes important when considering Kelsey Plum's recent comments. Plum, who serves as the vice president of the Players' Union, sounded far less like a hardline negotiator this week and more like someone preparing for an agreement. She acknowledged that the union fought hard to secure revenue sharing, described it as a major achievement, and said she is proud to be involved in helping reshape women's sports. Most tellingly, she added that her focus is on the game rather than the gap. That does not sound like the mindset of someone gearing up for a strike. It sounds much more like the tone of someone moving toward a deal.
You're a max contract player, like the fact that your free agency of the biggest CBA that you have ever had in the history of the WNBA, the most money that any of these players have ever seen in their professional women's basketball careers, the fact that you now only have a week to figure out your destiny. A lot of these players are going to take one-year deals, but that is not good for the fan experience. Now, if it ends up just being just this year, people are taking one-year deals, and then next year there's going to be a lot of shuffling, and that's like the real.
Now let's move to the part that is almost certain to create real tension inside team locker rooms. The new clause that accelerates max contract eligibility for rising young stars is bound to spark friction between veteran players and the newer generation. And the league was fully aware of that possibility when it included the rule in the proposal. this was clearly not a coincidence. It appears to be a carefully planned strategy meant to create just enough division within the players' union to make the deal easier to finalize. From the league's point of view, the reasoning behind this move becomes easier to understand when you look at the bigger picture. There is a group of veteran players who have spent many years in the league, and several of them have been outspoken about the need for improved salaries, better conditions, and overall progress for players. At the same time, a new generation of talent is emerging, including athletes who have not even entered the WNBA yet, such as Paige Bueckers. Under this proposed structure, their earning potential looks completely different from anything previous players experienced. The veterans laid the groundwork for the league. They competed during seasons when the average salary barely compared to an entry-level office job, or even what someone might make in generous tips on a busy Friday night. They kept the league moving forward in years when television ratings were modest and arenas often had large sections of empty seats. That commitment deserves recognition. However, professional sports leagues rarely operate based on rewarding what was built in the past. Their primary focus is forecasting what can generate revenue in the future, and the players expected to drive that future growth are younger athletes whose names are already widely recognized. So when the league announces a rule stating that any player on a rookie contract who earns all league honors can secure a maximum contract in their fourth season, it is clearly signaling where it believes the next wave of value is coming from. What the league is essentially signaling is simple. It understands exactly which players are driving revenue, and it wants to ensure those players remain in the WNBA. By attaching major financial incentives to their contracts, the league is making it more appealing than ever for its most valuable young stars to stay. From a business standpoint, that strategy makes perfect sense. However, veteran players who are no longer on rookie contracts and therefore do not benefit from this clause are likely to have strong opinions about it. The underlying message within the proposal, even if it is never openly stated, is that the league's long-term future is being placed on a specific group of players, and it is not necessarily those who have been in the league the longest. The Indiana Fever offer a clear example of how complex this situation can become within a team structure. Aaliyah Boston, for instance, would be eligible for a maximum contract as soon as 2026. Kelsey Mitchell has been an important part of that roster for several seasons. However, under the current salary framework, a team can only have one player on a maximum contract at a time. That means the Indiana Fever will eventually have to make a difficult decision. And that decision becomes even more complicated when you consider that Caitlin Clark could become eligible for a max contract in 2027. If you are sitting in the Fever's front office, your focus cannot be limited to the upcoming season alone. You also have to plan for what the roster will look like when your franchise cornerstone becomes eligible for the largest contract the league allows. That financial space needs to be prepared well in advance. Every dollar committed to other players today could make that moment more challenging. Because of that reality, the moves being made during this fast-paced and somewhat chaotic free agency period are not simply about building a team capable of winning in 2026. They are also about setting up the financial and roster flexibility needed for 2027 and the years that follow. Teams that fail to plan that far into the future may find themselves in a very difficult position when that moment finally arrives. Now take a step back for a moment, because there is a larger picture here that goes far beyond any single team or individual contract. The recent revenue-sharing payout, $8 million distributed to players from the 2025 season, represents a defining turning point for the league, marking a clear before and after moment in its financial evolution.